I have this theory that time is an arbitrary concept invented by man to measure how close or far away Halloween is at any given moment. This whole year, through all the fire and brimstone, I've constantly caught myself thinking about how much better it would be if we at least had some fall leaves and carved pumpkins lying around. And now that it's all finally here, it feels like the season has just about ended, and any moment now we'll be flooded with candy canes and gumdrops and sugar and happiness and bleh. And you know, it's interesting how one comes to develop fascinations with holidays like these, to the point of considering aesthetics to be an emotional safe space or a seasonal crutch. And one of the main ways that this happens is, of course, through television and film. And as we've talked about numerous times on this channel, there were a lot of interesting Halloween specials on when I was a kid that are worthy of being revisited. In the past, we've looked at Cartoon Network's Scary Godmother specials, innovative in their exploration of 3D technology and emotional trauma, and of course, the ever-iconic all-grown-up Halloween special, which taught us the lesson that filming dead bodies is a great way to start a creative career. Well, today I wanted to hop back in and look at a few more classic stories made by Nickelodeon specifically. Some of these are going to be the first things that I think of when I hear the word Halloween, and some of it's going to get a little more obscure. This video is going to be a little bit rushed because I just want to get this out in October without upsetting the release of all my other videos. With that, let's get started. Okay, so quick thought. Do you guys want to hear me talk about Icarly? Well, sorry to say I won't be doing that in this video, but I will be making an Icarly video, a review of the full series if we can hit 400,000 subscribers by the end of December 31st, 2020, New Year's Eve. So if you want to help the channel, support a potential future video, and make me feel all gooey inside, then consider hitting that subscribe button down below. Additionally, if Big Joe gets to 400k before we do, I'm gonna quit YouTube. I also want to give a brief shout out to Twitter user Brandon Finch, who suggested this topic when I asked people for Halloween video ideas. Twitter is a great way to interact with me. I often ask for suggestions on what to do next, so if you want to have that personal connection, follow me in the link down below. He also said I should start by talking about SpongeBob, which is a fantastic idea. When I was in elementary school, I was obsessed with Spongebob Squarepants, and everyone at my school knew it, and frankly, they all felt the same way. I had SpongeBob plushies, ate the official SpongeBob cereal, and I recorded every episode I could whenever it would air on TV. But for some reason, it actually took me several years to see the SpongeBob Halloween or Christmas episodes. Sometimes my parents would cancel the cable if they were trying to save up money, and I guess around the holidays is exactly when that would happen. And since these only aired at that one time of year, they always felt really special and rare, and it was a huge deal when I finally caught them one day. Let's really quickly study the first special, the 1999 classic, Scaredy Pants. The conceit of the story is that SpongeBob is one of the most easy to frighten people in Bikini Bottom, both being easy to prank and also frighten just by the aesthetics of Halloween. SpongeBob becomes tired of this and decides he wants to scare everyone else instead. However, SpongeBob is the opposite of scary. He is an adorable blob of friendliness. And so he decides to shave his head down so people won't recognize him and he can look more like a ghost, intended to be the Flying Dutchman. But it all turns into a total failure. The moment anyone recognizes him, they simply laugh and ridicule him. This is so bad that the Flying Dutchman himself appears over the Krusty Krab and states that SpongeBob's costume is so insultingly non-scary that he is going to take everyone's souls as retribution. However, as he takes off SpongeBob's costume, he runs away in fear. And thus SpongeBob learns the big lesson of the episode. The body horror was inside of him all along. Upon rewatching this 21 years later, I was shocked by just how effortless it all was. There's this one joke where Sandy's Halloween costume is a goldfish in a bowl, and Squidward says, "I don't get it." And that feels like it has to be the 5th joke they thought of when they started writing the show. No offense to the modern era, but I just love the way these early episodes flawlessly introduce character after character and all these nuanced components in such a way that you forget that a lot of these ideas were started by stories like this. Now, one of the coolest things about early SpongeBob is alongside the Christmas and Halloween specials, there were numerous episodes that weren't overtly holiday themed, but were still really fun to rewatch during that season. Take the Snowball Fight episode, which is based around the idea that climate change causes Bikini Bottom to get cold once a year, which is a really funny and surprisingly topical joke. What I'm getting at is that there are actually numerous SpongeBob episodes which aren't overtly Halloween stories, but still fit the spooky theme. These would get aired during Halloween marathons and would be featured on Halloween DVD box sets, so I think they count in a way. One of my favorite SpongeBob episodes as a kid was the Graveyard Shift, an episode where Squidward and SpongeBob are forced to work overtime at the Krusty Krab, leading Squidward to prank SpongeBob by telling him a fake story, only for the story to actually turn out to be true. It's Siren Head all over again! I remember one year for Halloween, I actually went as the hash-slinging slasher, which was my favorite costume I ever did. We never really had the budget to buy new costumes, so whatever we went as every year was always some recycled thing, you know, using a Harry Potter cloak or some baseball caps around the house. And so all you needed for this costume was an old robe and a spatula, and it was so funny to us kids, but none of the adults got it. One episode which arguably should be considered a Halloween story is I Was a Teenage Gary, which premiered as part of a Halloween marathon and obviously has fitting themes. In one of the first Gary-centric episodes, Patrick surprises SpongeBob with a trip to Ukulele Bottom for the annual jellyfishing convention. SpongeBob, afraid to leave Gary alone for such a time, decides it's okay once Squidward agrees to come check up on him to make sure he's fed. Squidward does no such thing, and Gary becomes sick and weak. SpongeBob calls in an expert quack, and he's given a dose of snail hormones to boost into Gary, and why does this feel familiar? Sure enough, SpongeBob is accidentally stung with the needle, and that night while he's left alone, his body is sent through a transformation, and he becomes a snail. This is one of those episodes where the true horror comes from your own actions coming to cause the suffering of others, or maybe it's slowly turning into a snail, I don't know. Long story short, Squidward gets stung too, and the episode ends with the 3 snails singing on a fence under the moonlight. Now you might have noticed that the transition there is pretty unique, unlike most transitions you'll see in the show. There was actually an urban legend for a long time that after this shot, there was originally another transformation sequence. It wasn't until about 5 years ago that someone uploaded footage of the original October 28th broadcast, where we can clearly see that the wipe was always there. Now, I'm not too shocked that it turns out that a shared memory with SpongeBob turns out to be false, because I realized while rewatching the show that a lot of moments are at least a little bit different from what I personally remember. For instance, in the episode Pickles, there's a scene where SpongeBob lifts up the tongue of Bubble Bass, revealing that he's been hiding the pickles of the burgers he's eaten under his tongue. A woman from the audience then yells out, "And there's my car keys!" Now, I remember that bit lasting for a straight minute, with everyone at the restaurant finding something under his tongue, but it's just that one woman. And what I've realized is that I'm not remembering the episode itself, but the thoughts I had about the implications of a really funny joke. And I think this is unknowingly how a lot of adults remember these episodes, as photocopies of the impact that was left on us instead of accurate records of the stories themselves. Although, as a quick tangent, there are 2 things worth noting about that. There is one scene from the episode Just One Bite that was cut after the first broadcast in America due to jokes about gasoline causing an explosion, as it was feared that that was something that kids could very easily imitate. Additionally, do you remember the episode which mentions, quote, an embarrassing photo of SpongeBob at the Christmas party? If you have a memory of them actually showing the photo, you probably actually are thinking of the Nickmas Christmas commercials, which first of all are the most aesthetically perfect spoofs of Rudolph that I have ever seen. Secondly, feature a pretty funny joke about Butch Hartman's ego. And third, shows a collage of embarrassing photos, which starts with SpongeBob clearly referencing the episode in question. Also, Plankton, what are you doing? She's 9! Speaking of Rankin Bass spoofs, let's wrap up this section by looking at the stop-motion special The Legend of Boo-Kini Bottom, which aired in 2017, and oh my goodness, this episode is so beautiful it's worth watching just for the visuals. Not only did it remind me of Rankin Bass movies, but there was also a lot of the Haunted Mansion in there. And while it's not the best spooky SpongeBob episode, I feel like it's the one I'm gonna feel like rewatching every year just to get in on those amazing visuals. Well, we can't talk about SpongeBob all day, although I'd very much like to, so what do you say we move on to something else? So I tried to look into other cartoons to rewatch for this, but I'll admit I just wasn't in the mood to rewatch Cat Dog or Rugrats or whatever. So when a few people on Twitter recommended another movie which I'd never heard of, I kind of jumped at the chance to experience something new. That being The Boy Who Cried Werewolf. Starring Victoria Justice and directed by the creator of such hits as The Chippendale Murders, the film was released 10 years and 1 week ago, and apparently is one of those things that some people just can't get out of their minds. Now I'll admit that when I started this, I just wasn't feeling it. The setup in the first 10 minutes is just sort of boring. There's a bunch of long scenes that I feel as if I've seen in about a dozen other Disney Channel movies, and I was just like, bleh. You know, mean girl bully scenes, illustrations of high school made for people in middle school, a scene about how their mom is dead, we've all been there. But then something weird happens. Suddenly there's a scene where they get a letter about some castle they've inherited in Wolfsburg, Romania, from a relative that they have never heard of, and it just lifts this weight off your shoulders, because it means the whole thing isn't gonna be some stupid corny-ass high school film, which I absolutely was not in the mood for. At this point in the film, Victoria Justice is trying to be ugly, you know, like a Princess Diaries Peter Parker kind of thing, but it just looks like a hot person dressing up like an ugly person for a really cruel Halloween costume or a TikTok viral challenge or something. And later when she's dressed normal, it's supposed to be shocking, like whoa, but Victoria Justice always looks like Victoria Justice all the time. So they get to Romania and some random adult starts talking to the younger kid, which is normal in Nickelodeon movies. And he says something about a mythical werewolf who appears in the night to scare off vampires. And the moment he drops that line, the film becomes fucking amazing. Because the instant he says that, you think, oh shit, this is a Twilight knockoff. And the next thing you know, every scene in the movie is fun, partially because, you know, it actually does get pretty good, and partially because it's just a lot of fun to guess, like, who's the werewolf gonna be? Who's the vampire gonna be? Is it him? Is it him? Is it her? And when they finally reveal it, you're like, ah, that's so funny! Anyways, Victoria Justice, who is a vegetarian in this movie, goes to the butcher shop to get some supplies, but uh-oh, someone's clumsy. Ah, that classic trope, sexy man drops large meat on vegetarian. Every romantic film in 2010 had this scene, right slap dab in the middle. I gotta give praise to this little dude, this little child actor. He's the one that really sells the plot. Like to everyone else, this is just another road bump in their careers. He acts like this is the cinematic masterpiece that will be projected straight onto his tombstone. But the best character in the movie is the Old Manners Countess, who is portrayed as really creepy but has a bunch of slow building jokes that really pay off. Like her bumper sticker in this one scene, or just her ringtone. Oh, baby. Super funny. The two kids find a hidden laboratory with a bunch of weird vials, and Victoria Justice accidentally drops one and steps on it, and it turns out that vial was filled with werewolf blood, and because she stepped on it, she has contaminated her blood, and she starts turning into a werewolf. Man, if anything in the world could like turn you into a werewolf, the one thing I would never guess would be like reusing needles. The special effects in this film are really great, by the way. Like, I guess the suits are a little bit weird sometimes, but damn, when you're watching a low quality off-air rip, you do not notice. The only drag is that at some point, when the giant werewolf starts fighting like 5 vampires at once, you start to wonder why it's not ripping people's heads off, and then you go, oh right, kids movie. So instead they throw people into the sunlight, and that does the job without affecting the rating. And yeah, I'd never seen a werewolf movie go for wholesome family moments during the scenes where they're all werewolves. It was really cute. This is probably one of the only movies I've ever seen that started off as so bad that it's good, stayed there for like 10 to 15 minutes, and then was just so good that it's good for the rest of the runtime. I mean, you do have to accept that as a made-for-TV movie, there's usually a cap at how good it could be, so I think this one is as good as possible. And hell, since we've jumped back 10 whole years with this film, why don't we go ahead and jump back 20 for our next topic? Okay, so it quickly became obvious while I was working on this that if I didn't talk about Crybaby Lane, people would ask me to do a video about Crybaby Lane. And originally I thought, everyone knows this film, what's the point of talking about it? But then I realized I've never actually heard anything about the movie specifically, just generally the community and phenomenon surrounding it. So I told myself, what the hell, I'm trying to convince myself that Halloween is really setting in this year and I'm not distracted by anything else. Why don't I go ahead and watch this one? For those of you who don't know, Crybaby Lane was, for a time, a piece of lost media that was often associated with creepypasta. It was known to exist, people remembered it, but it was lost to the public, and many claimed that it was because it was too scary, and that this is why it was never rebroadcast or sold on home video. But finally, in 2011, a Reddit user revealed that they had a bootleg recording of the movie on VHS, and uploaded it in its entirety to YouTube. Nickelodeon responded to the overwhelming popularity of the thread by re-airing it in 2011, and then again in 2017. This was a pretty big deal, you have to understand. What was presumed by a lot of people to just be a silly lost episode creepypasta was confirmed by Nick overnight and then nonchalantly re-aired. This would be like if Nick suddenly came out one day and said, oh, Squidward's suicide? That was real, here it is. Now, I've had 1 or 2 friends over the years who have brought up Crybaby Lane as an example of boring lost media, aka lost media that was more interesting as a journey than a destination. But upon rewatching, I was pleasantly surprised and actually had a pretty good time. It's no cinematic masterpiece, it clearly was made on absolutely no budget, but I think it's just so spooky and atmospheric that I understand why so many people wanted to find it. The movie starts off on this beautiful sequence where we're basically read an old creepypasta. A farmer's wife gives birth to conjoined twins, and the farmer, ashamed, hides them from the world. However, it soon becomes obvious that one twin is good, and one evil. One of the twins suddenly comes down with a sickness, and it spreads, and soon both twins are dead. The farmer, ashamed of his negligence, saws the twins apart and buries one in a cemetery and the other on Crybaby Lane. We're then introduced to our protagonists, Andrew and his brother Carl, who's being told the story by a wacky undertaker who I'm sure won't turn out to be the farmer in the story. Ah man, I remember being a kid, hanging around funeral homes and talking to random old men. You know, not on school nights, mom would say, but hell, it was the 90s, what was she gonna do? Carl sees himself as the protector of Andrew, who he has to help overcome his fears and become a man.
My job, as I see it, is to teach you how to live. Life is like wrestling.
To try and impress a group of girls, the boys plan to play a prank, where they go to a local cemetery, find the grave of a child, and do a fake seance for the child they heard about in the story. However, by pure coincidence, it turns out that the grave they choose is actually the grave from the story, and an evil spirit is unleashed which begins possessing everyone in town. I will say there's a good chunk in the movie where it's not totally clear what's going on, and this is by far the part that works the best. The unsettling buildup of worry is as much the important part as all the shots of people with white contact lenses in. In the end, Andrew has to fight possessed children, supernatural beasts, and impartial parents to finally discover the other grave, where he unleashes the good spirit and saves the town. It's a good film, which I certainly think I would feel pretty okay showing to a kid, but it's not this horrifying fear fest that the internet has made it out to be. It turns out Nick didn't ban it because it was traumatizing or because they got complaints. They didn't even ban it. It was just aired once, presumed a failure, and forgotten about. Personally, I thought a lot of the humor to the film is understated in discussions. Despite being a twin murderer, the Frank Langella Undertaker character has a lot of really funny yet understated moments. I do understand that there's a general feeling that the film didn't live up to the hype, but I don't think that's what's important here. Like SpongeBob, the worth in pieces of media such as Crybaby Lane derives not only from what we take from them as adults, but also the impact they had on us as children. And if the version of this film you have in your head is different from the actual product, that's not disappointment, that's creativity. And I think it's pretty damn cool that a movie like this could still have a recognizable influence because of that. If you'd like to see another video on a piece of lost media, consider watching My Garfield Vacation, which is a documentary I made about a huge collection of Garfield lost media I found and restored back in January. I had to take the original upload down for a few months because of copyright threats, but it's back up and I'd really appreciate you guys checking it out because it's my proudest video and it deserves more views, damn it. And don't forget, hit subscribe if you want to see that Icarly video, and you want to help me feel good and less sad all the time. We're trying to get to 400k by December 31st, which is all I've ever wanted for 2 years, and if we can pull this off, I think I'll honestly become a crybaby myself. And finally, consider checking out all of these playlists for Halloween or Nickelodeon videos. I am super proud of my Halloween content, including things like the Scary Godmother video, and I'd like to think it's the sort of thing people can rewatch every year. So I'd really like it if you guys did that. Thanks for watching, thanks for subscribing, and with that, I've been Quentin Reviews, and that's all you bleed.